All right, real talk. If you've noticed people suddenly getting weird around you, giving you those sideways glances, or acting salty for absolutely no reason, this message is specifically for you. And before you think I'm exaggerating, let me be clear. This isn't about being dramatic or playing victim. This is about understanding a very specific psychological pattern that happens when someone evolves past the version people were comfortable with. You're not imagining it. You're experiencing something that's been studied, documented, and observed across cultures, organizations, and social systems for decades. Here's what most people will never tell you. Growth makes you a moving target. And when you start operating from a different frequency, clarity, boundaries, self-respect, people who were used to the old you experience something psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Their mental model of who you are no longer matches reality. And instead of updating their perception, many of them will resist, criticize, or quietly pull away. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your evolution reflects something uncomfortable back to them, their own stagnation. So if you've been wondering why your circle suddenly feels tighter, why old friends seem distant, or why random people are throwing shade without cause, stay with me. What you're about to understand will completely shift how you interpret resistance. And more importantly, it'll show you why collecting a few haters is actually a sign you're doing something monumentally right. This isn't a coincidence. This is confirmation. Let's break down exactly what's happening and why you should never apologize for it. First, let's get something straight. Haters aren't always loud. Most of them don't confront you directly. They operate in subtlety. A dismissive comment here, a skeptical tone there, sudden unavailability when you need support. Social psychology explains this through a concept called status threat. When someone perceives that you're rising, especially if they're not, it triggers a subconscious defense mechanism. They start minimizing your progress, questioning your motives, or finding flaws in your decisions. Not because those flaws exist, but because your growth disrupts their internal hierarchy. And here's the kicker. The criticism often comes from people who were close to you. Friends who seemed supportive suddenly become skeptical. Family members who used to encourage you start pointing out risks. Colleagues who once collaborated now compete. This pattern is so predictable, it's almost mathematical. Behavioral science shows that proximity intensifies comparison. The closer someone is to your starting point, the more threatened they feel by your elevation. They're not mad at you, they're uncomfortable with the gap you're creating. What makes this even more interesting is that your behavior hasn't necessarily changed. You're not bragging, showing off, or putting anyone down. You're just existing at a higher frequency. Better boundaries, clearer communication, stronger self-discipline. But to those still operating from old patterns, your composure reads as arrogance. Your silence reads as judgment. Your focus reads as distance. You've become a mirror, reflecting what they're avoiding in themselves. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they're not ready to look. This is why growth is often lonely before it's liberating. The transition phase between who you were and who you're becoming is where most resistance lives. People haven't adjusted yet. They still expect the old responses, the old availability, the old you. When they don't get it, frustration surfaces. And that frustration, when left unprocessed, turns into subtle hostility. You become the problem simply by refusing to stay the same. And that right there is the most misunderstood form of resistance you'll ever face. Now here's where this gets empowering. Every person who resists your growth is giving you data. They're showing you exactly where you used to be and confirming you're no longer there. Think about it. If you were still operating at the same level, they wouldn't feel threatened. If you were still seeking approval, complaining about the same problems, or stuck in the same cycles, they'd feel comfortable. The fact that they're uncomfortable means you've shifted, and that shift is measurable even if you can't see it yet. Neuroscience backs this up. Human brains are wired for pattern recognition and predictability. When someone behaves consistently, we build a mental shortcut for them. But when that pattern breaks, the brain experiences what's called prediction error. That error creates discomfort. And discomfort, when people don't understand it, often gets mislabeled as dislike. So when someone suddenly treats you differently, it's not always personal. It's their nervous system trying to recalibrate to a version of you they didn't predict. Here's the practical takeaway. Stop interpreting resistance as rejection. Start seeing it as confirmation that you're on the right path. Every skeptical comment, every passive-aggressive joke, every sudden distance is proof you've outgrown a previous container. And containers, whether they're relationships, environments, or mindsets, will always resist expansion. That's not a flaw in your growth. That's physics. Pressure increases before breakthroughs happen. And if you're feeling pressure, it's because something is about to break open. This reframe changes everything. Instead of shrinking back to make others comfortable, you lean into the discomfort. Instead of questioning whether you're doing too much, you recognize you're finally doing enough. The right people will celebrate this shift. The wrong people will resist it. And the haters? They're just highlighting the gap between where you are and where they're stuck. That's not your responsibility to fix. That's theirs. Your only job is to keep moving forward with integrity. Let's talk about why being misunderstood feels so heavy. Humans are social creatures. We're wired for belonging and acceptance. When people we care about misinterpret our actions or judge our choices, it triggers deep discomfort. Psychologically, this taps into what researchers call rejection sensitivity, the fear that we're being excluded or devalued. But here's what most people miss. Being misunderstood is often a sign you're thinking at a level others haven't reached yet. When you make decisions based on long-term vision instead of short-term comfort, people won't get it. When you choose discipline over distraction, boundaries over people-pleasing, growth over approval, it looks strange to those still prioritizing the opposite. Your choices don't make sense to them because they're operating from a different framework. And instead of admitting they don't understand, many will label your choices as wrong, extreme, or unnecessary. That's projection, not perception. This is where emotional intelligence becomes critical. You have to learn to separate other people's discomfort from your direction. Just because someone doesn't understand your path doesn't mean you're lost. Just because someone questions your boundaries doesn't mean they're unreasonable. Most criticism comes from people who haven't walked your journey, faced your challenges, or done the internal work you've done. Their feedback is based on their experience, not yours. And their experience is not your compass. The paradox is this: the more aligned you become with your true self, the more alienating it can feel initially. Because alignment requires honesty, and honesty exposes misalignment everywhere else. Relationships that were based on convenience, validation seeking, or shared dysfunction start feeling hollow. Conversations that once felt deep now feel surface level. Environments that used to energize you now drain you. That's not you becoming difficult, that's you becoming discerning. And discernment always creates separation before it creates clarity. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Some people benefit from your limitations, not maliciously, necessarily, but structurally. When you stay small, insecure, or dependent, it allows them to feel secure, capable, or needed. Your struggle becomes their reference point for feeling stable. Your doubt becomes their validation. Your stagnation becomes their comfort zone. This dynamic is rarely conscious, but it's incredibly common. Organizational psychology studies this phenomenon in work environments, families, and social groups. It's called systemic equilibrium. Groups unconsciously resist change because change requires everyone to adjust. If you improve, others have to confront whether they're improving. If you set boundaries, others have to respect them or reveal they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. If you level up, the entire dynamic shifts, and shift creates discomfort for those invested in the status quo. This explains why your growth might trigger unexpected reactions. The friend who suddenly becomes competitive, the family member who keeps reminding you of past mistakes, the colleague who questions every new initiative you take. They're not necessarily trying to hurt you, they're trying to restore the balance they're familiar with. And the easiest way to do that is to pull you back down. Not through force, but through doubt, guilt, or subtle discouragement. Understanding this frees you from taking it personally. It's not about you, it's about them protecting their position in a structure that your growth is threatening. And once you see this pattern, you stop arguing, defending, or trying to convince. You simply continue evolving. Because real growth doesn't need permission, it doesn't need agreement, it just needs consistency. And the people who can't handle your rise will either adapt or remove themselves. Either way, you win. One of the clearest signs you're evolving is when you stop reacting to every opinion, criticism, or negative energy thrown your way. This isn't about being cold or dismissive. It's about being selective with your attention. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, and it's one of the strongest indicators of maturity and personal power. When you no longer feel the need to defend, explain, or justify yourself to everyone, you've crossed a threshold most people never reach. This shift is visible in how you handle conflict. You used to engage with every argument, trying to prove your point or change minds. Now you observe, assess, and choose whether engagement serves any purpose. If it doesn't, you disengage without guilt. That restraint looks like indifference to people who thrive on reaction. But internally, you know it's strategy. You're conserving energy for what actually matters, and that conservation amplifies your effectiveness everywhere else. Here's why this matters. Every time you react emotionally to criticism, you give power away. You signal that external opinions can destabilize you. But when you remain calm, unbothered, and focused, you signal the opposite. You're internally anchored. That anchoring makes you unpredictable to those who used to manipulate your emotions. And unpredictability shifts power dynamics instantly. People stop testing you because testing no longer produces results. They start respecting you because your boundaries are consistent. This is also where you start attracting different people. Those who appreciated your old reactivity fade out. Those who respect your new composure step in. The quality of your relationships improves because you're no longer tolerating dysfunction, drama, or energy vampires. You're selectively investing in people who match your frequency. And that selectivity doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you intentional. And intentionality is magnetic to the right people while repelling the wrong ones. Let's clarify something that trips people up. Resistance is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's often confirmation you're doing something right. When you challenge norms, set boundaries, or refuse to participate in dysfunction, you will face pushback. That pushback isn't proof of error, it's proof of impact. You're disrupting patterns that people were comfortable with. And comfort, even toxic comfort, resists disruption. History is filled with examples. Every innovator faced skepticism. Every leader faced criticism. Every person who chose a different path faced doubt from those still on the familiar one. This isn't unique to you. It's universal to growth. The difference is how you interpret it. Most people see resistance and assume they're wrong. They retreat, apologize, or shrink back. But those who understand growth see resistance and lean in. They know friction is part of the process. Applied to your life, this means every sarcastic comment, every dismissive attitude, every person who suddenly distances themselves is actually confirming your trajectory. If your growth wasn't real, they wouldn't react. If your boundaries weren't effective, they wouldn't push back. If your evolution wasn't threatening old dynamics, people would stay neutral. The fact that you're experiencing resistance means you're creating impact, and impact, by definition, generates reaction. So, instead of questioning yourself when haters emerge, thank them silently. They're showing you exactly who can't come with you to the next level. They're revealing misalignments you might have tolerated too long. They're clearing space for connections that actually support your growth. Resistance isn't a roadblock, it's a filter. And the sooner you recognize that, the faster you move forward without unnecessary weight. So, yeah, if you're collecting haters like Pokémon, congratulations. You're doing something worth noticing. You're no longer blending in, playing small, or staying comfortable. You're challenging norms, setting standards, and refusing to shrink. And that will always generate resistance from people who aren't ready to do the same. But here's the truth they won't tell you. Their resistance has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with what you represent. Growth, accountability, evolution. The moment you stop taking criticism personally and start seeing it as data, you reclaim your power. You stop wasting energy defending yourself to people who were never going to support you anyway. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were always too small. You start moving with confidence, knowing that every person who falls away creates room for someone better aligned. And that alignment, over time, builds a life so solid that external opinions become irrelevant. Here's your final takeaway. If people are uncomfortable with your growth, let them be. If old friends can't celebrate your wins, release them with love. If family questions your choices, stay grounded in your vision. You don't owe anyone access to your peace, explanations for your boundaries, or apologies for your evolution. You owe yourself integrity, consistency, and the courage to keep going, even when the path feels lonely. Because here's what happens next. The noise fades. The haters either move on or become irrelevant. The right people show up, the opportunities align, and you look back at this season and realize that every bit of resistance was refining you, sharpening you, preparing you for what you're walking into. So keep collecting those haters. They're proof you're playing a bigger game. And the bigger the game, the more valuable the win. Stay focused, stay grounded, and keep evolving. The best version of you is just getting started.